We'd like to give a few minutes to our business partner, CC's Pizza, to tell you about some of the wonderful programs they have. And we are streaming this program live on our YouTube channel. So we'll be accepting questions from our Twitter page, the YouTube page, and our Facebook page, because we're hip like that. So with that, please, Tim, come on up and tell us a little bit more about what CC's Pizza can do for the community, as well as our individual PTA members.
All right, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the pizza. Okay? We appreciate it. There's a lot out there, and if we don't have enough, we'll bring more. Okay, so we're okay with that. All right. One of the things that I've struggled with is just getting more involved with the community here locally in Norman. And one of the things that I realized is I just need to get more into the community. And so here I am. We've gotten Jackson that's done a fundraiser. Okay, so basically what we do is with our fundraisers, we give 20% back in pizza bucks. Okay, we can't compete with the likes of BJ's, Chewy's, some of those kind of places, but we all have a need for pizza, right? Yes. So at some point in time during the year, we have a need for pizza. Okay, kids love it, everybody loves it, and if you don't love it, we'll get you some hot wings. We're doing wings too, so whatever. So, but anyway, I gave you some information about how to raise money with CC's Pizza. We also do boosters. We sell pizzas to Lexington. We sell pizzas to Noble, to their high school games, some of those kinds of things. So they, in turn, go back and resell those pizzas, $2 a slice. So basically, you would make $10 on every pizza that you were to buy from us. So that's really, you know, if you sell 20 pizzas at a high school basketball game, middle school basketball game, football game, whatever, that's $200 pretty easily. So also, there's a pamphlet over there, raise some dough, looking for a quick way to raise some dough on a key tag flyer. Did everybody get this? If you didn't, let me know, we'll get it for you. It's 50 cents each. Okay, I'm going to give everybody in here is going to get a key tag. Okay, there's 3 really cool coupons. The first one's going to be a free buy one, get one free kids buffet. Okay, buy an adult, get a free child for anybody under 11. Okay, you can use this forever. All right. Your organization can purchase these for 50 cents a piece. You can sell 100 of them and you make $450. Okay? Really, really quick. It's going to cost $50 for your organization to sell 100 of them. Really cool deal. Also, nobody's heard of a celebrity server. I talked to a couple of principals. I said, hey, you're the celebrity server. Come say hi, welcome to CC's. And guess what? People are going to come in and see you do that. Okay? That's a fundraiser night at CC's. All right, so we just want to get more involved and more committed. Also, I've gotten Happy Thanksgiving coloring sheets. It says, please like Norman PTA Council right here on Facebook. All right, we got 15,000 of these, okay? So every child in Norman should have it. I want to tell it's been really a cool opportunity. I wish that I had the new logo. I didn't know that she was going to have the new logo.
Sorry about that.
Every child, one voice. I think that's really important. And that was one reason why I handed out the community leader cards, because I know you guys work hard, you do a lot of work, and you're raising your children, and it's very, very important that they have a voice. And I want to tell you all thanks for everything that you guys do. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. CC's is also a great option for teacher appreciation. It's a PTA or parent-teacher conferences this week and things like that. So keep that in mind. Thank you again, Tim. I appreciate it.
We get 2,400 teacher appreciation cards away this year. I don't know if you guys know that, but everybody got a free buffet, every teacher in the district.
All right. With that, I'd like to ask our panel members to please come up.
Hi, I'm Sandy Behan, and I am the president of the League of Women Voters here in Norman, and I'd like to welcome you all here tonight, and thank you very much for asking us to be a part of this. Our moderator tonight will be Liz Pierce, who is from the League, and she will explain the rules for all of you and all of you as we go along. But as you came in, I tried to catch most of you and give you white cards and pencils. If you have questions for the panel, if you would please write those questions on these white cards and then raise your hand. I will come around and pick those cards up, and we'll sort through them and make sure to try to eliminate duplicates so that we can ask as many questions and get as much in as possible this way. But if you need, I gave one card out. If you need more, please don't limit yourself. Don't think that one card means you can only ask one question. We'll give you more cards. All right. You need to keep the pencil because we're out. But if you want more cards, if you need more cards, just follow. And if you didn't get a card, please put your hand up and we'll come find you. All right? And with that, I will, sorry, very quickly, before we start, I think it's important that you know where the League of Women Voters stands on an issue like education. If you go to our League of Women Voters of Oklahoma positions statement on our webpage, you will see that we support, well, actually, we believe that it is the state's responsibility to provide quality education for the children of Oklahoma. We also believe that this needs to be coupled with adequate financing, accountability, and also with an efficient financial procedures that help us to be able to appropriately fund that quality education. And we also support overall tax reform, whatever that may take, in order for us to be able to maximize the amount of dollars that we have available. If you have read the Oklahoma Constitution, I don't know if anyone in this room besides me has read it. I have no life, so it's well, if you download it, it's 500 pages because every article, even if it has one line, goes out on one page. But that's another story. But you'll notice that it's Article 13 of the Constitution deals with education. I don't know if that's pathetic or not, but it's Article 13. But it says that the legislature is charged with providing a system of free public schools for all the children of Oklahoma. And with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Liz, and she will explain the rules, and we'll get started. Put your hands up, and I'll bring you the card.
Basically, the rules are really simple. We're going to try and ask as many good questions as we can and keep it rolling. And so our forum tonight will only be as good as the questions that you submit. And we're just going to screen for duplicates. So the index cards, they're a non-gift way to collect questions, but we found it to be pretty effective. So first of all, we're going to start with opening statements. Those will be 3 minutes. And we'll rotate down the line. And then after that, we'll take questions with 1 minute responses. So if you'd like to start, Scott, introduce yourself and make an opening statement.
Thank you, Elizabeth. My name is Scott Martin. I have the honor of serving as a state representative for House District 46 here in Norman, also a decent chunk of Milton. I've been in the legislature now for 9 years. I have the good fortune and honor of serving as the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Education, so all the education funding that's going through the state generates out of my committee. That's not only Common Ed, but higher ed, career tech, and a few other agencies like the Arts Council and PTA. But anyway, I'm thrilled to be with you guys tonight. And I got to tell you, we spoke, Emily and I spoke at the PTA Council. It was maybe somewhere before last session or during session or something. It was a little while back. And we had a good attendance, I thought, but this is fantastic. I don't see seats, wherever you are, it's probably food. So that's awesome. I mean, this is just fantastic. And I got to tell you, I read and listen to a lot of articles and stories right now about education across the country. All of them, in some form or fashion, talk about what's wrong with education. And as I look out in the audience tonight, this is what's right with education. It is parents and teachers coming together, having a vested interest in their children, and really taking the extra step to be there for your children and partnering. And that's what I feel like those of us in the Norman delegation, that's what we're all about, is partnering with whether it be PTA or the school district, whatever the case may be. I recently I've had a few different interviews lately, whether it be the paper or OU Nightly, and I keep going back to the reason why education is so important to me right now. It's because of my own children. I have 3 and another one on the way, and two of our 2 oldest ones are in school right now. And so everything that we do or we don't do, we tweak this, we don't tweak that. For me, it's all under the prism of my own children and what I'm doing or not doing for their future. And so that's how I'll be going and looking into this next session, and I look forward to your questions, and that's where my perspective will be coming from that, and my involvement and position in the legislature, I hope will be instructive to the dialogue tonight. So thank you for having me, I appreciate it.
Joe Siano, I'm Superintendent of Schools of Norman Public Schools. It's my 16th year with the school district. I've been really fortunate. I've worked with a lot of very, very talented people over my career in 2 other districts in the state of Oklahoma, Putnam City, as well as the Oklahoma City Public Schools, before I had the opportunity to come to Norman. And so first I'd like to thank the PTA Council for supporting and organizing this evening. Thank the league also for your coordination and facilitation. I think that would be very helpful. You know, certainly I'm just interested in hearing a whole array of comments, and I think, again, my appreciation to everybody who agreed to serve and be up here this evening, because I think that's really about the public dialogue, and I value this opportunity. You know, public education, I think we have to agree is in I believe in a crisis stage. I think we are at a turning point in our state related to public schools. Public schools, and I think administrators and teachers would be the first to say that we can always get better. Students drive what we do, and as students change and demographics change, public schools change and have to adapt to that. So there's always, if you're not getting better, you're going backwards. So we agree that we have to get better. But there's also great things that happen in our public schools every day, not only in our district, but across the state. And I think it's time that in our state we begin celebrating those successes while we build and close gaps. Norman tends to be a model, I think, for what public education is about. It's about quality students being served by talented teachers, supported by a community that values public education and values kids. So when you put all these ingredients together, you will find successful kids and successful schools. And I'd like to spend some time tonight talking about those successes as well as the challenges, because I don't think we celebrate those as much as we should.
Good evening, my name is Brenda Heigl. I'm president of Oklahoma PTA, and it's my pleasure to be here with you tonight. Oklahoma PTA is the largest child's advocacy group in the nation. Our national PTA is 118 years old, and Oklahoma PTA is 100 years old. So we've been around for a long time, and our primary focus is advocacy. And if there's anybody who knows how to advocate best for their child, it's the parent. And as parents, that's what we need all of you to do, is to advocate for your child. Whether it's in your classroom, at the Capitol, wherever you feel most comfortable, that is the primary focus that we need everyone to do. That's what we're here for. We as the parent are the only voice, because our mission says we will be every child's potential reality. And only you, your parent, knows what your child's potential is. And we have to work with our legislators, with our teachers. We all have to come together for a common goal, and that common goal is public education. How can we make public education better? And PTA has several resolutions that we are going to be bringing forward, to asking for your help to bring that point home, is that we as a parent are going to stand up for our children.
Excuse me. I am Linda Sexton. I am the president at this moment of the Board of Education in Norman. I've been serving on the board for 26 years, and if Oklahoma PTA is 100 years old, that's about how long I feel like I have been on the Board of Education. But the Board of Education is made up of 5 individuals who want to hear from everybody about what's good, what's wrong, what we need to fix. Our phone numbers and email addresses are easily accessible on lots of written pieces of paper and also on the Norman Public Schools website if anybody needs to contact us. But we are here for all of the kids in Norman. Some of us ran for the board over these 26 years with specific agendas. gifted education or special education or athletics or one thing or another. That was our top thing we really wanted to work on. And it takes, so far, almost everyone that's been on the board with me, and it's been several people by now, it takes us about 20 minutes to think, oh, wait a minute. I'm here for all of these kids. All of these kids are ours. And by now, I really think that way, that every child in this district is mine, and every success is mine, and every place we fall short is mine. So we really need to hear from people. To start off some of what's probably on people's minds with this forum, I thought I would let you know that nationally, schools spend an average of $11,338 per child. Regionally, it's 10,000 something. I'm not great remembering numbers. And in Oklahoma, it's 8,000 and something. So we have, every time I read an opinion piece about accountability, I want to know how we're supposed to be accountable and be competitive with wealthier districts all across the nation and around the world, while Oklahoma's children are falling further and further behind economically. And the truths of what poverty causes in terms of educational difficulties are all over the internet. It's not something that educators make up. It's real. And we need more resources, not less, so that we can have morning programs, after school programs, counseling, health referral services. There are a lot of things that schools need to do, which are referred to as wraparound services. And as while we're just barely managing to keep class sizes under control, it's very difficult to implement the kinds of programs that we know would work in lifting the achievement levels of the kids who come to us not ready to learn. So keep that in your head while you ask questions. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Emily Virgin. I have the pleasure of representing House District 44 at the state capitol. House District 44 is the central part of Norman, and I was elected in 2010, so I will be hopefully next year starting my 4th term in the legislature, which is very hard to believe. I want to, Bria, though, I did hear back from Senator Sparks. Okay. And unfortunately, he has a very sick golden retriever right now. So he is dealing with that situation. So he said he may make it, he may not. So I just didn't want everybody to think that Senator Sparks was somebody who just didn't show up, because he's not that kind of guy. I want to thank all of you for being here. I especially want to thank the PTA Council, because Norman's PTA Council, ineloquently, they kick some butt. And they are obviously the best in the state, but it's really, really important to have as many voices at the Capitol as possible speaking for our children. And the Norman PTA Council is a very strong and loud voice at the Capitol. And so I'd like to thank them for putting this on and for all that they do. Dr. Siano talked about successes and challenges. I think we all know about both of those. I think we all see the successes in our public schools every day. Spending time with our public school students will show you a lot of successes. But anyone who has spent any time in a public school, especially a public school elementary classroom lately, can tell you that we are truly in a crisis right now, with large classes, outdated textbooks, teachers spending a great deal of their already low salary on materials for their classroom because the schools just can't afford it. And you all had the opportunity to pick up the editorial by David Warren saying that Oklahoma is in a crisis, and I absolutely agree with that. I think it's a sad state of affairs that we are considering raising the sales tax to fund public education properly, but I'm not sure what else we're going to do at this point. because we all, I think everyone at the Capitol agrees that teachers need a raise. But the political will just hasn't been there yet. We don't have the money to do it right now, and that's a reflection of, in my opinion, misplaced priorities. But the reality is that we have to do something, and we have to do it very, very quickly. And so I hope that some of your questions will focus on that. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Cari Manzer. I wear a couple of different hats, so I'm going to go through them. But first and foremost, I just want to tell you that I'm a teacher. I taught 5th grade here at Adams, and this will be my 10th year here in education. I am currently serving on the board of the PTA Council. I've been asked to serve as the teacher liaison, so I'm the teacher voice that serves on the PTA Council. In my daytime job, I am the president of the Professional Educators of Norman, which is the Teachers Association here in Norman. And I was overjoyed and honored to be asked to sit on this panel because I believe that it's a great opportunity for all of us to get our voices in the room and talk about the priorities in public education. I believe that you all are here for a reason. You're here for the same reason that I'm here. Everyone in this room is deeply committed to the success of all of the students here in public schools. And so you're here because you want to know what's coming. You're here because you have questions. I have questions too. And I just want to applaud you for being here because you're showing and proving your dedication, and I hope that when we leave here tonight, we will have ideas of where we can go and what we can do for our students in Oklahoma.
Thank you. Now we'll begin the question and answer period of our program. Each question will have 1 minute response time, and Joyce is keeping time. She'll let you know when time's up. But anyway, I'm going to begin by just directing questions to a couple of you, and then if someone wants to follow up, they can. That way we can keep it moving. So my first question would be for our representatives. What's the most important education issue you see developing in the upcoming session? Representative Virgin.
Thank you. I think the most important issue coming up in the next session is how we're going to properly fund education for the next year. I think we have implemented a number of reforms that have been, I think, mixed results at best, but we haven't given much money to those reforms. And I think all of the educators in the room know that. And so I think funding is the most important, there he is the most important issue that we're going to be dealing with. But going along with that is how we're going to address the teacher shortage in Oklahoma. And I think a big part of that is how we're going to find the money to give teachers a pay raise, to bring them up to where we're not losing the best and brightest that come out of our colleges of education in Oklahoma.
Since money is going to be a significant challenge, and that's to say it lightly, this next session, I'm going to take a different angle. And that's something that I believe that we can and should get a huge success on this next session, and that's testing. We came very close at the end of last session to eliminating some of our EOIs that we had, and unfortunately we weren't able to get that done. Frankly, it was one of the biggest disappointments I had this last session. I think that from what I hear on a federal level, they are ironically reaching some consensus up there on No Child Left Behind, reauthorizing that and giving the states control over testing, which would be fantastic. And so I think that the money is going to be certainly a significant issue, but policy-wise, I believe that testing reform and reducing testing is going to be a huge opportunity for us to show some leadership across the aisle this next year, and I'm hoping that we can get that done.
Thank you. And Senator Sparks, we'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, make an opening statement. Our question was, what do you think is the most important education issue developing in the next session?
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm John Sparks. I guess Emily told you we were having a canine crisis at our house, and so sorry about my tardiness. I kind of felt bad leaving my wife with a 100-pound dying golden. Apparently he's not dying, he's just sick, so yes. Anyway, so anyway, I apologize for my tardiness, like I said. You know, there's just no getting way around it. We're just not giving our schools the resources to function at a high level. You know, we're not only are we not funding for greatness, we're not even funding for mediocrity. It's a miracle that our teachers are able to do as well as they are. I think until the voters demand that education be made a higher priority, it will continue to not be. And I'm not sure what needs to give in that. I think you can see kind of the difference between Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Oklahoma City's been investing in maps for 20 years now. They see a return. They're happy to invest in that because they see a return on their investment. Tulsa doesn't. They continue to have opportunities to invest in their downtowns, and they don't see the return. I think it's why are you saying that? Well, until people of Oklahoma believe that their investment provides a return, and the return is not discretionary, but it is a absolute necessity, I'm not sure that we'll go and get there. So I do see the awareness level rising though. In the 7-8 years we've been there, the push for education, for investing in education has grown, and I believe that pressure on the legislature will continue to increase.
Thank you. Would anyone else like, or, never mind. So, next question, Dr. Siano. What do you think are the pros and cons of Warren's sales tax proposal? Oklahoma's children, our future.
Well, and I think Emily touched on that. So I also support President Warren's initiative. I think it's bold. I think it's timely. I think that the state is sort of out of options right now. And I think we've kind of painted ourselves into that corner of fewer options. As you let things degrade, your options become smaller in terms of intervention. I think the negative part is the regressive issues, the regressive aspect of it. There are probably other more appropriate funding mechanisms as we look to the future. But my sense is this, that it's just like kind of going to an emergency room. Probably a doctor would say, hey, there's like 10 things I have to do, and they're probably more appropriate. But first you got to save the life of the other things that are not worth doing. I think we're coming in that position. I think we have to do something now. We can't afford to lose any more teachers. We can't afford to go further behind. And then I think we have to look to the long term about what that answer is.
Thank you. Would any of the legislators like to follow up?
I would actually, on the regressive issue. I think I agree that we need to do something, we need to do it right now. However, I find it troubling that a sales tax taxes 100% of the income of a lower income person who has to spend locally and has to spend it on food and necessities, whereas someone of more means can shop elsewhere, shop online. They'll buy their groceries too, but it won't take 100% of their budget, and then when they want to buy something else, they'll go online and not pay sales tax. So I'm very troubled about that, and I know that there are moves here and there to tax internet sales, but oh my goodness, the bookkeeping and record-keeping nightmare of that is probably why it hasn't happened yet. So while we discuss how we're going to fund education, I would like for everyone to keep in mind how hard sales tax falls on those who can least afford to pay more taxes.
What do you believe prevents local districts from raising local taxes to increase teacher salaries?
State law. We are capped at how much millage we can charge, and I think the purpose behind that was so that each local community was supposed to tax at rate X as their contribution, and if property values were high, that gave that community a lot of money, and the state could give less to that community, and if the property values were low, that community struggles to even come up with local taxes, and there must be more state tax money to go. And that works great if there's adequate funding at the state level. When it's inadequate everywhere, property values fall, property values never rose, and then the state can't fund either. It's just pretty abysmal, as we know.
I'd like to jump in a little bit, just quickly on that. So, we are fortunate in the state that we do have a really good equity formula. Other states are being sued constantly for inequity in terms of distribution of dollars. So we do have a really good formula. But I'm also a real believer that if that formula is in place, all taxes that have been collected have been distributed through the equity formula, local districts should have an option to raise their cap. And I want to just comment on Representative Martin has tried to, maybe just to get me off his back, tried to propose that in committee, that option, and it would be a local option. Didn't go for it, didn't get it. Hasn't been able to get it through committee, but that has been on the table, and I think local funding should be on the table even in a variety of ways. Bond issues, usage of revenue should be a local decision.
Let me give you an encouraging word. I was in a chair dinner study today, and it had to do with, part of it had to do with school safety. And they were talking about what potential revenue sources are there that's out there, and this item actually came up. It was a freshman legislator who was proposing some ideas of increasing local portion of revenue, and I said, I've tried that, and I think it has a lot of merit to it. And so, and this was a rural legislator too, which is one of the opponents. You know, rural folks are not huge proponents of raising property taxes. Nobody's a huge proponent of it, particularly in rural Oklahoma. And so, anyway, the discussion is out there still, and hopefully, maybe that'll give us an opportunity to take some action this next session and give local districts, if they desire, I say local districts, us as local voters, the opportunity to do that, whether it be for, you know, whatever item you wanted to spend it on. But I was encouraged by this dialogue today.
Would anyone else like to respond?
Which question are we responding to? On the sales tax proposal, or, okay. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, I actually kind of hate the idea of raising sales taxes. Everyone knows the effect that it has on lower income individuals in Oklahoma. But I view this as the only realistic option that we have right now. And I say that as a very frustrated legislator, that this is the only option that we have right now. But as Dr. Siano said, this is like going to the emergency room. We have to stop the bleeding at this point. And there's nothing to say that the legislature in the future, if we come up with another funding source, can't lower that sales tax, but raising it has to go to a vote of the people because of State Question 640. So trust me, I've spent a lot of time agonizing over this issue, as I think my other colleagues have also, but and it's a tough issue, but I think that we have to do it at this point.
I'd like to speak to that. As a parent, yes, no one is thrilled with the idea of raising our taxes, but we have to look at the long term, our children. This is to help our children. If we cannot have quality teachers, keep our good teachers here, we will not be able to have a future. Our children are our future, and we have to put the money there to help them with their futures.
I would suggest that we should.
About the issue, as there's the issue related to that tax. Yeah, I don't think there's anything more devastating, though, to people in poverty than a poor educational system. So yes, the tax is not the best tax, but the ones being hurt in the state by where we are today are really the students in poverty. And there's no way they're getting out without a quality education. So yeah, it's a trade-off where we are today.
Okay, talking about funding, Senator Sparks, what is the process to reverse the reduction of state income tax? Only last year, state income tax was reduced from 5.25% to 5%.
Yeah, it was, last year was an interesting scenario. In the last week, we had, when the budget was coming through, there was a bill to pull, I believe it was, how much we pulled out of the rainy day fund. We diverted from the rainy day fund. So, yeah, it has been. So we were diverting money out of the rainy day fund to the education budget. And so we put an amendment in the Senate on that to delay the implementation of the tax cut. Now here we have it. We're pulling money out of the rainy day fund because we don't have enough money. And in the same bill, we have an opportunity to delay the tax cut. So the vote to delay the tax cut lost, and the vote to pull money out of the rainy day fund won. Completely counterintuitive. So what's the first step? The first step is to realize we need to do it. I see the stop sign. I'll stop the editorial and speak to the rest. You have to have a supermajority. In order to raise taxes in the legislature, you have to have a supermajority to pass. The supermajority is a 2/3 vote to legislators to increase taxes. I would suspect if you can't stop the delay of the tax cut, it'll be hard to implement a tax increase. I guess if I can bring that back full circle. That's why I was rambling at first.
Would anyone else like to address?
The question was how to stop the income tax reduction?
How to reverse it.
How to reverse it. As Senator Sparks said, there have been efforts to do that in the legislature that haven't made it anywhere. But this is something that voters could take upon themselves to do. But this would be construed as probably would be construed as under State Question 640 as being an increase in taxes. So as Senator Sparks said, it would be either, I think it's actually a 3/4 majority of the legislature, or an initiative petition, as the sales tax petition is right now. And there's another income tax trigger set to go into effect that will bring us down from 5% to 4.85%. Some of us say delaying that is not an increase in taxes, so it doesn't take a supermajority. And we've tried to do that, but can't exactly get anywhere with that.
And I'd like to add that to make the scenario even worse, every time state income tax increases in the take, it helps trigger these lowerings. And it doesn't matter where that floor was. If we get poor enough that we're back to 1953 or 1922 or whatever in our income tax revenue, it's not that they picked a level that says if we don't fall below this, we will raise. It's that wherever we fall to the very bottom, every time we increase a little bit from the very bottom, it'll trigger a tax cut to make sure we stay at the bottom. So the whole thing is completely ridiculous, in my opinion. But that's the law, so we have to deal with it or get the initiative petitions out and undo it ourselves.
Can I follow up on that? On the ratcheting effect? So to apply some numbers to that, if your budget's at $150 and it says if your budget increases by 10%, the income tax rate goes down, it's cut. So if your budget's at $150, you have an oil bust and it falls down to $90, and then the next year you recover like to $99 or to $100, well, the way the law reads, that's a 10% increase. So you cut the tax rate. Now you're not at 150 where you were, or even, above 10% above that at 165. So that's when they say this ratcheting effect it keeps it. I sincerely do not believe that was the intent of the law when it was originally passed. I believe there was thought that, as things progress at an absolute level, not a relative level. But that's the effect of what happens when you have the bottom fall out of the oil and gas industry.
Part of the irony, I think, right now is that we actually are seeing increases in personal income tax in the state. Oil and gas is where we're having the largest hit right now. And to marry this with the other question is, I've already said it, but that's why the board initiative is to go to the vote of the people, because the only way now to be able to address it is vote of the people. And I think that Joe talked about the emergency room. If you look at polling numbers and if you just talk to the average person out there, nobody's going to want their taxes raised for the most part. But if they have to pick, it's kind of like the difference between being shot and stabbed. Nobody likes it. But the sales tax, for whatever reason, is the most attractive. We've seen that in Oklahoma City, as John mentioned, with MAPS. We've just saw it in Norman with Norman Ford. And that's even with Oklahoma's property tax being relatively low compared to the rest of the country.
Any other follow-up on the question? Ms. Manzer, what is the perception of educators on high-stakes testing?
I think that's a very interesting question. And the reason why I say that is because I think if you ask any educator how they feel about turning their microphone on, if you ask any educator how they feel about assessment, they're going to tell you that they believe that they need assessment in their classroom. They need assessment in their classroom so that it can drive their instruction, so they know where their students are and how to meet them. And every student in each classroom is different, so if you know where they are, you can teach them at that area, what strengths they have and what challenges they have. As far as high stakes testing is concerned, I believe that the majority of teachers would probably tell you that it is an undue stress that is put on the students, put on the teachers, put on the schools. Trying to find staffing to be able to do all of the differentiated sessions that you have for students who have English language learning needs or special education sessions. It's kind of a headache. So as far as high stakes testing is concerned, I don't believe that teachers are supportive. But as far as assessment is concerned, we definitely think that it has a role, and it's very beneficial to be able to assess your students in the classroom.
Thank you. Does anyone have a follow-up?
I just want to make a comment also about the same thing. First of all, I appreciate Cari's comments, because I believe that about our educators too. They understand the value of assessment as it informs instruction, but not as a high stakes. But I think we should also be really careful, because we're already seeing these editorials like the one today regarding the NAEP scores. So even when educators kind of get a boost of a positive editorial from the Daily Oklahoman related to the NAEP scores went up, it really had nothing to do with us or our work or the teachers. It had to do with a law which was faulty, the RSA law, and that's the third grade retention law. So what we do is we slice this little piece of data and then we utilize it for a purpose that it doesn't make any sense. So yes, reading scores have gone up a little bit in the state. NAEP is not a very good evaluation of that, but it is the one that we're using. But I would caution you about this. The challenge with the third grade reading law was twofold. Number one, to cut parents out of the decision related to their kids. So that's should be unacceptable to you. But secondly, it was really about the research on retention that says retention doesn't have a long-term effect on kids. Of course, the next year, they'll probably do better. That makes sense. But it's the long-term effect. The other thing is, if you hold back your third graders that are struggling, of course your fourth grade scores are going to go up. This is not brain surgery. So that's why Florida's scores went up so significantly. They held back thousands of kids. So fourth grade scores go up. I could figure that out. So it's the other piece of the law that I think parents ought to be careful of, because we will see a lot of patting on the back of this law and how impactful it is.
And I'd like to add something else about the high stakes testing. What makes it high stakes in particular, I think, is that the tests, the scores from the tests are used in ways that the tests are not designed for. That tests are designed to take a snapshot of a child's progress on a certain day. They are not designed to judge a school. They are not designed to test a teacher. But that's the way non-educators have decided we are going to, A, judge schools and test teachers. So there are the incredible emphasis on these standardized high-stakes tests are wrong in so many ways. They're wrong for little kids who cry themselves to sleep before the test, throw up during the test. They're terrified. They're wrong for the teachers because their jobs, it does not reflect how hard a teacher works or how smart a teacher works. And it certainly doesn't tell you the quality of a school, but that's what the non-educators have decided to do with those scores.
As a parent, I don't think any parent in here disagrees with the fact that our children need to be assessed. It's the only way that they can progress is as being assessed. What we object to as parents is the make it or break it test. Mm-hmm. That is what a high stake test is in the mind of a parent. Is it going to make or break my child? And that is the whole crux of the resolution that we passed this past summer at the PTA level on high stakes testing, is how we are opposing high stakes tests that make or break our children.
Do any of the legislators have a response as far as solving the issue of overtesting?
Well, as I mentioned in my opening comments, I think this is going to be the one real success that we can have this year, and I see a convergence that it's bipartisan, even on the federal level, very bipartisan, because as I talked to Congressman Cole about it, he's hearing the same thing from the other side of the aisle on the federal level. Everybody's fed up. And as you guys have eloquently said, as parents, we want to be able to assess our children and know where they're at. I mean, every week I'm looking at spelling tests, math tests. We just got the report card recently and was looking at those and going over those with our sons. And so no one's afraid of that. We all want that. But boy, have we gone way too far. This is not a recent occurrence. This has been building for a long time now. And hopefully this next session, it'll be one of the huge successes. I pray that we come back here next year and not only have the feds given us to fully address the issue, but at a bare minimum, the state has addressed the tests that are under our authority today.
Yes, I agree. My fellow panelists. I mean, there's no one better to talk about this issue and the effect that it has on our students than teachers and the people, the parents of the students who are here today. You all know how it's unduly stressful for your students. It's unfair, and as Representative Martin said, this is one area where we are seeing some major bipartisan support for reducing testing. We do have to wait on the federal government to allow us to do this. We've looked at state testing, and that's certainly still an option, but I think this issue in particular, because parents and teachers have been so vocal about it. Everyone in the legislature has heard about this issue. And so I applaud you for making your voices heard and truly making some progress on this issue.
No, I agree. It's, I think a lot of these tests were originally put into place, I wouldn't say as a distraction, but usually when you heard the call for more funding for education, often a response was, whoa, we just don't want to throw money at the problem. Whoa, we want to make sure we're spending it where it's effective. We need to test everybody to see who's doing it right. I suspect if I were cynical, I would think that people really didn't want to see what happened there, just was a distraction or a diversion or a delay. But regardless, we realize that it's not good policy. President Obama announced in the last week or so that he was going to do what he could to start rolling back the federal mandates on testing, which was interesting because he said originally, and I think it was when he was in the States in Illinois, he was actually a proponent of these tests, but he's come full circle, and so I suspect the federal government will be on our side as far as rolling these back.
Senator Sparks, I joked with my wife the other day when I read that article, I was like, oh no. Now I'm gonna start having some of my colleagues say we shouldn't do it. You know, I hope it doesn't come to that, yeah, I hope it doesn't come to that.
The next question is for Scott Martin and to all. Banks and hospitals use customer satisfaction surveys for accountability. Would you support the use of parent satisfaction surveys for school accountability?
Parent satisfaction, so sure, yeah, I mean, I think that, ask Joe or Cari, I bet they hear from parents all the time, and Linda. Sure, yeah, I think that'd be great. We currently have a system that we'll probably get to a question here in a second that's in place that's flawed right now, and we're gonna be looking at hopefully addressing that through a school grading system. Sure, yeah, I mean, I think that that makes good sense.
In our school improvement process, we currently are developing district-wide. In our school improvement process, we have a field of parent surveys, teacher surveys, and student surveys. And we're actually developing those so they can be more consistent district-wide in terms of questions and those kinds of things. So, yeah, I think it should be a piece of the puzzle.
This is for all. How can parents and teachers be more involved in selecting candidates who support public education in the primaries so that better candidates end up in the general election?
I'll start. Forums like this one are a great way to find out if candidates in a primary election truly support education. Everyone says, I support education, but what does that really mean? We hear people all the time saying, don't throw money at the problem, or I agree we need more funding, but I'm not actually going to do anything to give education more funding. So asking these tough questions is very, very important, and more forums like these are very important. I know that the League of Women Voters will be happy to put on a forum anytime you guys want. And I would also say that getting out and helping those candidates that you know support quality public education and support adequate funding for public education is very, very crucial to helping them get across the finish line. We can't do it by ourselves. There are always more doors to be knocked and more phone calls to be made. So choose your candidates wisely and work hard for them to get them to the state capitol.
Thank you. For Ms. Heigl, on No Child Left Behind issue, why pass a child on to the next grade when the child cannot read or pass the state test?
Based on No Child Left Behind, why should they be passed on?
Yes.
That's kind of it's an unbalanced scale there, because it's detrimental to the child's self-esteem, unfortunately, to be held back. But it can hurt them in the long run to move forward when they're not ready. So it does unfortunately take a lot of balancing on the parent and the child and the teacher's part to try to prepare that child in the best way possible to move them on. But unfortunately, No Child Left Behind requires us to hold children back that should be moving forward based on their personal abilities and not all. I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's more than scholastics. You know, it's more than scholastics based on how a child should progress.
I just want to remind that too. First of all, there's I think a misperception that educators don't believe you should ever retain a student. We retain students like long before the RSA. What we believe is there are circumstances with that child that make retention significant and have an opportunity to be successful. And then there are reasons not to retain the child. And unfortunately, the laws like the mandate that we had passed, and I don't think there's a No Child Left Behind requirement that we retain children. That was like our state came up with that one, modeled off of Florida's initiative, because they're doing so well. But, sorry about that, I'm not supposed to mention. But, so we do believe that retention has a place. The research, though, again, I think any initiative that our state brings forward, what our parents should ask is, what's the research that supports that? And there is no research that supports retention overall as an intervention for students that have reading difficulties. And that's the bottom line. There's no research that supports it.
I'd actually like to address that as well from the teacher's perspective. Many of us, a large majority of us, have gone to school to be educators. And there's something called with itness, where you know your children. You get in the classroom and you build your relationships with the children. You know how they're going to react when they have a test in front of them. You know how they're going to behave when they're sitting next to their best friend and when they're sitting next to someone who's not maybe their best friend. Learning is developmental. It is not a finite thing where, yes, you have skills you're supposed to learn at a particular grade level, but every child learns it at a different pace, and every child has different strengths and weaknesses. And so when you take into account the educator's perspective, all of the specialists and resources that we have in the schools, the administrators, the team with the parents, all together discussing this, just like Dr. Siano said, it's more of a consideration for the students, and it's more appropriate for the students.
And I always wondered with the holding kids back in third grade if they couldn't read. Well, obviously that would mean that they're going to get the same science projects, and they're going to get, everything else is going to be repeated too, whether they need it or not. And what made anybody think the fourth grade teacher and the reading specialist in the school weren't going to work just as hard to move that child along without giving him the same science lessons over and over again?
I believe that there's an extremely real reason for retention. I experienced it in my own life. I was held back in the second grade for reading and speech issues. It was the best thing that could happen for me. The difference is between where we have come today to back then is that we're getting closer back to where it used to be, but was that my parents sat down with my teacher, I'm sure there was probably other administrators involved, and they decided that's what was best for me. And I'm so glad that they did, because I desperately needed it. I didn't realize that at the time, but I needed it. And so there are reasons, there are real reasons for retention, for being held back. But you can't, as you guys have known for a long time, and there's not a single fix for every single kid out there, because every child's different. And because of you, the legislature has backtracked somewhat on that. I think there's probably some, even with that editorial today and press releases that have gone out, I still think there's opportunity for us to make that better.
Any other follow-up? This question is for Emily and Scott to follow up on the high stakes testing issue. With our budget shortfall, how can we pay for state testing as a replacement for high stakes?
Well, so we would, we looked at this last year, and if we get rid of our high stakes testing, we're actually going to save money. So not only can you look at it as a good thing to do for our students, but fiscally, it's probably the right thing to do for our budget also, and that's money that could go towards any other numerous things in regards to education. Maybe put more, something that's lacking is we need to put more money towards reading. So, there's any number of things that we could do with the money that can be saved if we eliminate the high stakes testing.
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point. When we look at, getting rid of the high stakes testing, we save money. That doesn't mean that we want to impose more tests at the state level. That money could be used for, as Scott said, for the summer reading camps and for things that we really want to do in education, but we don't have the money to do yet. And so I don't believe that we have a big problem with tests at the state level. Those are not nearly as expensive to administer as the federally required high stakes test. And we've all heard about the debacles with the companies that we contract with to administer these tests, and so there's obviously things that need to be looked at both levels, the federal and the state required tests, in terms of who we contract with, how we administer those tests. But I think that that's something that, especially those of us on the Education Appropriations Committees are looking at. And I will say, sorry to go over, but the change in who is leading the State Department of Education has really, really been beneficial for having a working relationship with the legislature. So I think that's something that we can be very, very happy about.
And to clear up that question maybe a little bit, we already give, kids take tests that their teachers design, and kids take some other tests that are required by a district, and then they take tests that are required by the state, and then they take tests that are required by the federal government. So cutting off a level doesn't mean that there aren't still plenty left.
Yeah.
One of the other things I'd clarify, I'm not pretty accurate on this. The assessments and assessment of students at grade levels is a federal No Child Left Behind, which I think they are easing back on. The high stakes testing choices are state choices. So this is something we can influence. It doesn't matter what happens in the SAA. And I'll give you an example. So the EOIs, having to pass 4 of 7 of those to graduate. And these are kids generally that have already passed every requirement by the state, every requirement by the district. The further requirement is a state requirement of passing 4 of 7 of the end of instruction exams. That is not a federal requirement that you have to do. That's something that's state imposed. Now, we have had discussions about what happens with those EOIs. You talk to universities about entrance into college, they don't even want to see the EOIs. They don't care. It has nothing to do with it. So that's why a lot of us have been lobbying for, and we hope parents might join us in this discussion, of doing the ACT as an exit type of exam. It can be utilized by kids and for further education.
If you were to just opt out of the state test, you could eliminate 10 tests that your child takes from the grades of 3rd through 12th. And of those 10, 4 of them are in the EOIs. There are 17 federal tests that the students have to take.
So they know an EOI.
Yeah, sorry, end of instruction test. That's the one that they have to pass 4 out of 7 to get their high school diploma. Of those 4 tests they have to take, only 2 of them are required by the federal government. The other 2 are state-imposed tests. There are, like I said, almost 12 state-imposed tests that our students do not have to take. And you have the right as a parent to opt out of those tests. So we have the documentation for you that we'll be happy to share with you. We have a parent opt-out letter that we'll be happy to give you that tells you exactly what test you can opt out for. And if we can get across to our legislators through this mechanism that we are opting out of tests, then maybe they will go along with what I'm hearing up here, is that they feel that we are testing our children too much and understand that we, the parents, are going to make our voices known on behalf of our children.
Thank you. Senator Sparks, what are the plans to replace the A-3F report card, and why do legislators continue to stand behind the A-3F grading system?
I want to thank whomever chose me for that question. I will tell you the A through F grading scale is a particular pet peeve of mine. The way the A through F, I think it should be abolished. The A through F system, all it does is tells you what your free and reduced lunch ratio is in your school. The number one indicator of how well a kid will do in school is the income level of their parents. Now, that could be because if you have a parent who's working 3 jobs, they're probably not gonna be around that, and it's a single income, single parent home, they're not gonna be around a lot to help with homework and other things. There are a lot of factors. Some are pretty, some are not so much, but that's the reality. The A through F testing gives no allowance, does not control for the income level. This might be a little longer than my time. The A through F test, as it's set up now, has no allowance for the income level of the parents. When this is brought up, often the response is, well, we don't want to make excuses for those kids. They have to get along in the world just like everybody else. But that's not what we're saying. If you have 2 kids in different schools, and their income levels of their parents are different, how they respond to what they're teaching gets washed out if you don't account for that. You may have kids at an affluent high school, say Jinx, and the way they're teaching algebra is terrible. But you know, they get along. You may have kids from a poor income school, the way they're teaching algebra, they're doing great. They're making great advances. But at the end of the day, maybe the Jinx kids are still a little bit better. They think, oh, well, the way they're teaching at Jinx must be the way to do it. Well, no, it's not. It's just the way the kids come to the classes to learn. The best analogy I know of is, imagine you're testing drugs for high blood pressure. You have 2 groups, and you don't look at which one of the 2 groups smokes. Well, how are you going to know how well they do if you don't know which one is the smoking group and which one's the not smoking group? You know, you want the drugs to do well in both groups, but you have to know the underlying set of people being observed. So that, again, the A through F, while it changed the ratio of scores and GPAs and all this other stuff, if you don't look at the number one thing that affects the ability of a kid to learn in school and how they do, well, then the rest is just static. And it's no surprise, when this came out, there was almost a perfect relationship between the grades and the free and reduced lunch numbers. Now again, please do not leave here and say, I'm saying kids from schools with high free and reduced lunch numbers get a pass. That's not right. It's just establishing the baselines. So my response to A through F, we need to scrap that deal. It's, I think it's punitive in nature, and at best a distraction, and at worst promotes bad policy.
Oh, I was just gonna say that this was another so-called reform that came to us from policy that had been enacted in Florida. And I think that the single biggest factor that we can be thankful for in hopefully changing the system or getting rid of it is that we have a different state superintendent. Superintendent Hoffmeister knows the flaws in the system. She wants something that can measure, but she wants it to be useful to parents. I know that from what she said a million times. And that's what we want. We want parents, and Dr. Siano has said this, we want parents to have something in front of them that they can actually use. And parents can't use the A through F grading system as it is now. It is completely useless. Useless is a nice word to describe A through F. As Senator Sparks said, it is punitive. It was designed to make our schools look bad. And I think we absolutely have to get rid of it. So I think there is movement on that.
We had, prior to A through F, we had state and federal measurement tools in place. We still have federal measurement tools in place. And they were there for a purpose, they were there for a reason. And so the reason why I filed the bill last session to reform our current A through F system is because it is flawed. It wasn't at any urging of our new state superintendent, although I appreciate her support of my effort. It was actually at the urging of our local administrators who I sat down with, or my local principals who I talk to on a regular basis. It is flawed, and I just heard today in our interim study we had, the state superintendent, they've been meeting with OU and OSU researchers. They are going to be bringing some recommendations. They're going to have some initial recommendations in November. They're going to have some further recommendations in December. And they're going to be looking for legislators and legislative solutions to these recommendations. And I told them today that I'm more than happy to be supportive and to help out. I think this will be an area that you'll see some movement on, I hope. And the thing I appreciate about Dr. Siano is he's like, look, I'm not afraid of measurements here in Norman. We've got a very diverse student population. I'm not afraid to be measured, but we just need a tool that is equitable for everybody and it's reflective of everybody. And so that's what I hope comes out of this, that we have experts that are at the table. They're going to bring a measurement tool to us that is reflective, is really reflective of a diverse student population.
I would like to chime in.
Oh, go ahead.
What I want to do is back up to what John Sparks said a minute ago about not giving the high free and reduced lunch count schools a pass. We know what causes a lot of the differences between well-off families' children and poverty level families' children. And it has a lot to do with the environment in the home, a kid being at home alone with a television as opposed to a kid being home with a babysitter and dancing lessons and piano lessons and sports teams and visual arts lessons and all of the things that those kids do after school. I really strongly buy into the research, but it's going to cost money. This says schools in after-school programs could make huge strides with the poverty level kids by giving them movement and music and sports and nurture after school in a very carefully designed program to bridge a lot of those gaps and bring them along a whole lot faster. Then we can measure them in a different way.
So just a couple of things related to this. First of all, the release of the A through F, and my opinion's been out there, but that is, I will give you we have to give the State Department a pass, and the legislator, that is a federal requirement that they do have a accountability system in place. This is just the poor one that we have, so we have to release those grades even though they're inaccurate. And hopefully ESEA will change that. That's not a requirement, because the bad news is, and I know Scott's really done a good job of getting this legislation going forward, but the bad news is if you talk to the researchers, and I was in a meeting with them, and State Superintendent's advisor, they'll blatantly tell you there is no way to do what the legislature wants to do with A through F, no matter how many ways you change it. It's not going to be effective. There's no tool to put a grade on a school that works. So that's the bad news, and we'll see how the legislature deals with that. The other piece that I would say is that it does have to do with socioeconomics, and it is aligned to that. But there's there's one more variable that's really important that isn't counted in the A through F or any other accountability system, and that's the variable of time for learning. Kids take different time. It takes kids time to learn. It discounts time. So even if you looked at the A through F for Norman, and I'll throw this out there, and it's across the state, the C's, D's, and F's for most elementary schools are in schools of high poverty and in the elementary level. Now, why is that? Because that's where the kids are at their greatest deficit, because they're coming from different places. If you look at Norman, though, even in where we have schools of C's and D's, they feed into middle schools of B's and high schools of A's and B's. Now, that tells me that the educators in Norman are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, because we're not supposed to have every kid at the same place in second grade. We're supposed to have every kid as close and close that gap by the time they're seniors. That's our job. So if there's any shred of something in the A through F that you can say is, it's working exactly the way it's supposed to. You want A and B high schools, because that's when kids are leaving. It doesn't matter what's happening in second grade or where they are, because that's where they're coming from. We need to take them from there and move them forward. That's called public education.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
That's okay. This is a quick follow-up question for the legislators from the audience. Please elaborate on Warren's sales tax initiative, specifically how teacher salaries would be increased.
So the President Warren's proposal would give teachers an across-the-board raise of $5,000. And the article that is on the table outside explains it pretty well. So it would bring us up to closer to the regional average. And that's one part of it, and then some of the funding would go to higher education. We all know how tuition and fees are going up, so that's the intent with that money. And another portion of the money would go to the career tech system. But the vast majority of the money that would come from that proposal goes to Common Ed specifically for a $5,000 across the board pay raise for teachers. And then another smaller portion of that money, I think $50 million a year, goes to Common Ed for grants. And that language is not exactly very clear or fleshed out yet, but we're hoping to hear more details as to what that could include.
Does anyone else want to follow? Also, will the legislature be working to change the teachers' retirement system? And maybe that relates to funding?
Okay, I'm guessing, I think first I was thinking, where's this going? Well, I think I'm gonna give the positive part to whoever asked this question. I think you'll like this better. A few years ago, our unfunded liability for all of our pension plans collectively was $16 billion, and now it's gotten down to $8 billion. That's collectively, and teacher retirement is the largest portion of that. I think where this question's probably going is, are we going to go from a defined benefit to defined contribution plan? And I can't say whether there'll be proposals out there for that or not. There was a bill that was passed and signed into law this last session that changed the retirement plan for general state employees, new hires, from a defined benefit to a defined contribution plan, but I can't speak to whether or not there'll be any efforts this session to do that for teachers.
If one of the legislators will comment on this, how much money for schools is coming from the lottery, and how's that money spent?
Yeah, if this is an issue that I get pretty passionate about, and that I think also ties into the 1 cent sales tax proposal. There are a few issues with the lottery. Number one, I think it was overpromised from the beginning. I think we can all agree on that some of the revenue estimates were off from the beginning. Another problem with the lottery is that it has a profit restriction, and so it's a complicated thing that is hard to explain for me. I was a political science major, okay, I wasn't a math major. But 35% of the lottery's profits have to go to common education. And while that seems like a smart thing to do, in states where they have reduced the profit restriction or eliminated the profit restriction, that means that more can be given out in prizes, more people will play. That's how a lottery works. But there's also a prohibition on online gaming that was in the original proposal. Online gaming was included, so that's why some of the revenue estimates were off. So there are ways that we could make more money for common education off of the lottery. I don't know if the political will is there for that to happen in the legislature. We've tried to reduce the profit restriction, which would produce more money for common education, and I'll shut up after this, but the lottery state question included language that said this is not to supplant Common Ed's revenue, Common Ed's budget. So the money that the legislature was going to give to common education has to stay the same, and then this lottery money comes on top. That's not how it has worked out.
Our percentage has gone down.
And so, that money has been taken into account in the budgetary process. Scott can probably talk about that even more in depth as he has written a budget. But if we want to make more money with the lottery, there are ways to do it. I don't know if that is the way that the state and the legislature want to go, though. So that was a long-winded answer. I can talk all day to you about the lottery if you have other questions, though.
You want to say anything? The lottery's passed before the three of us in the legislature, and yeah, it was supposed to raise $300 or $50 million, something like that. It raises anywhere between $60 to $70 million a year. 30 or so million of that goes to common education. The best proposals that I've seen that have been out there to reform it have been to wait until actually the revenue comes in and then allocate it, because what's happens about every year. There's an estimate, and that money is put out to the districts, but it's usually they overestimate from what actually comes in, and so it doesn't work out very well. I've never gotten really good accounting of it per se, and to Emily's point, I've never factored. I've been intimately involved with the budget for 7 years now, and it's never been factored into our discussions. So we know it's a component that's out there, but it's not something that we budget. And I don't talk to the lottery commission and go, okay, how much are you bringing in? And I'm going to lower our appropriation by that amount. I've never been a part of those discussions. So anyway.
How many percentage points have we lost?
Well, that's an appropriations, total appropriations. So I think there's about $30 million that goes into the state appropriations that's attributed to lottery. And the way that occurred, I pretty well believe that if you remember the last teacher's salary increase of $3,000 across the board, I can't remember what year that was. It was paid for first outside of the formula of appropriations, and it was paid for with lottery money to pay for the $3,000 raise. Unfortunately, the year after that, it was rolled into the formula. So the $30 million then became part of appropriations. So we do get lottery money, but now it's distributed across the district in the normal budgeting process, as opposed to a single outside the line budget. So the good news for that is that we're about $180 million underfunded from where we were in 2008. We would be 180 million plus 30 million if we didn't have the lottery money in there. So the lottery money has helped in that shortfall, but not that much. So for the Norman Public Schools, what the change in 08 funding to today is 1,700 more students and about $6 million less in funding of where we were in 08. You know, we have seen increases in appropriations since 08 as the recession kind of pulled back. But we're still about, I say, 150 million, maybe somewhere in that neighborhood, below where we were in 08 funding. But the $30 million for lottery is in there. The other percentage of the budget that I would watch as a parent or look for in terms of legislative action that we would hope to see changes, there was a point where about 36, you hear 50% of the budget goes to education. Well, that's true, but that's university, career tech, and common schools. Common schools used to get about 36% of the entire budget. We're currently down to 32% of the entire of the budget. That's a percentage I think is an indicator of, you know, the long-term commitment maybe of the legislation towards appropriations in common schools. Is that about right?
Yeah, and it's the lottery is split up in between three ways, so it's the same, similar dynamic. Yeah, it's 70 million roughly. Common Ed, higher ed, and career tech. Career tech gets a very small.
If I could add something very small to that, when the lottery was passed, we didn't have as much tribal gaming as we do now, and so that has had a big effect on how many people play the lottery. Not to say that the tribes don't contribute part of that money to the state; they absolutely do. and they take care of a large portion of our population. But that wasn't something that was factored into how much money the lottery would make each year. So part of the decrease that you see in the lottery is also due to the increase in tribal gaming.
Thank you. This is a question for Oklahoma PTA. What pieces of original legislation or issues is the organization focusing on in this term that will impact students or teachers?
Our main focus, our advocacy goals right now are for, based on the opt-out, and that we are going to strongly recommend that parents opt out of high-stakes testing. That's primarily our advocacy goal, is go that on that, and also supporting Boren's 1% sales tax increase.
Thank you. There's also a specific question for you, Ms. Sexton. Many districts do not use school counselors as building test coordinators. Would you support using NPS school counselors as counselors and not testing coordinators?
I absolutely would, and since I've been on the board, I've probably had the discussion over 150 times that a lot of what our counselors are asked to do, in my opinion, are more clerical in nature. It's another of those things where hiring more people, which would free the counselors to do their intended jobs better, would still add another layer of expense, which I'd be happy to take on if we ever got an increase in funding. But as you've heard, we're not even level with 2008 yet. We have 1,700 more children in the schools. Have your insurance bills gone up? Have your utility bills gone up? Well, you know, schools pay all those things too. So when we're still teetering not too far from our 2008-2009 budget amounts, with all those extra expenses, adding another layer of personnel, which would be an excellent idea in my opinion, isn't going to happen until we get some robust funding for school general expenditures.
Now, I would also say if the requirements related to those assessments would go away, not necessarily the assessments, but the monitoring of those assessments, the way we have to, apparently we can't trust our teachers in a classroom to give a test, we have to have like 8 other adults in there. If a lot of that red tape related to assessment would go away, and the penalties related to assessment, we might be able to facilitate a different way of doing it. But there are so many important pieces to it, they better be coordinated and they better be done right, or schools suffer and students suffer the penalty.
And for the representatives of Norman Public Schools, what do you see as the critical issues facing you right now, kind of rank?
Every year that I've been on the board, and that's 26 years, funding has been a critical piece of...
Sorry, I'm not sure what you said.
Let me repeat that for you, please.
Siri apparently did.
Anyway, beyond the funding, okay, let's say beyond the funding issue, my dream as a school board member since I started was to have our schools become community centers with services for families in the building with a different staff after school. Our school libraries should be available to children and families till 7:30, 8 o'clock in the evening maybe. We should have recreational activities, we should have tutoring. There are a lot of things that would help families that we could do, but guess what? It costs money to hire someone to run the library and run a computer lab and give people access to all these things that are locked up after school. We could be a resource to the community and a resource to our student families in ways that would help those students along a whole lot. That's been my dream since I started. We've never even become close to being able to discuss initiating a program like that because of funding. So that's critical. It is critical to me that we support our less advantaged families and our English language learning families with school resources beyond the school day?
I would say it's teacher recruitment, teacher retention. It's the bottom line. We look at the colleges of education. Very few teachers are going into the field. We have has been talked about in a lot of different of these questions. We have challenges in public education. Students that can be bright, that can learn, that can be successful, but they present challenges. We need bright, creative people choosing to go into education, and they're not. And it's partly because of money. But the other piece I will say it is, more of anymore. If you take the last 5 years up until our change in administration at the State Department of Education, common education, public education has taken a battering in terms of quality, what's happening in schools, has taken a beating. And I hate to say it, but if you're a young person who can choose just about anything to do in the world, why would you go into a field that your leadership at the state level, your leadership sometimes at the national level have basically indicated is a failing system? You have no interest in doing that. We have to change the dialogue about public education and celebrate the successes, so that if I asked you to raise your hand, and I've done this at PTA meetings, and this is the saddest thing, if I ask you as a parent, how many of you who have college-age going kids are encouraging them to be teachers, there's not a hand that goes up anymore. And there you go. Fine. Oh, well, there's different. But for the most part, and because of, I think, the rhetoric related to public education, not because it's not a great field to go into. We have to change the dialogue, get these bright people into our classrooms, and public education will do what public education always does, successful for every kid.
Ms. Manzer, can you kind of give us a feeling for, as a community of parents, legislators, what can we do to support you? What are the most important things that we can do?
Well, I've been kind of taking notes on a lot of things, and celebrating our successes is one of the most positive things we can do for education. As Dr. Siano said, we need to start talking about the positive things that are happening in our classrooms every day. When your children come home from school and tell you something exciting, share it on Facebook. Social media is so powerful right now in positive and negative ways. But the most positive that we can be about public education, the better. And so we need to find ways to celebrate our successes. We need to know that our legislators are people. They're regular people that we can talk to whenever we want to, and we should be talking to them. We need to know what our values are. Your values are obvious because you're sitting in this room. You care about public education. You care about students. So we need to vote our values, and we need to encourage other people to get out and vote for public education and our values. And we need to start participating in more positive movements. I'm going to just go ahead and give you a few of them right now, even though I'm supposed to stop, because I wrote them down. Something that Dr. Siano kind of spoke to earlier is we hear the failures, we hear the negativity. And I went to an interim study yesterday where the quote was said, if your child came home from college and said they wanted to go into education, how would you feel? Most people, it would be a gut check moment. You would say, oh, but you could be a doctor. You could be a lawyer. As a student in education, I was told the same thing. You're so smart. Why would you want to be an educator? That's why I want to be an educator, because I want to make a difference in the lives of students. And so people like Sean Sheehan, who is the Oklahoma State Teacher of the Year, who's from Norman Public Schools, he started a campaign called Teach Like Me. And it is blowing up all over, actually, the nation. People are going on social media and they're hashtagging Teach Like Me. This amazing thing happened in my classroom today, hashtag Teach Like Me. And it's to encourage young people to get into the profession because there is so much positive. It is hard, but it is worth it.
And then other things that we can do, I spoke at the school board meeting earlier this year, and if you'll notice, our president of the school board is wearing red, as am I, and I know some of you in the crowd are wearing it. You probably didn't know, but you're supporting public education right now by wearing red. Every Tuesday, you can wear red for public education. And if we take pictures and hashtag that on social media, that's a positive thing. We're showing people that we care about public education. And 2 more hashtags, I know it's social media, but teachers are starting a movement called hashtag Ask a Teacher. When you have something that you want the legislators to know, hashtag Ask a Teacher. If you want to know if high stakes testing is affecting students, hashtag Ask a Teacher. But I have a challenge for the parents. Why don't we start hashtag Ask a Parent? I haven't heard about that. But you all have such a valuable role in your children's education, and you all are the ones that make a difference. Last year, Scott Martin said at our much smaller at Washington Elementary, but there were very important people there, he said, you know what's going to make a difference in education? It's the parents. The parents paying attention and the parents getting involved. So this collaboration that we have right now, we have to move on it. We have to know our values, and we have to vote.
Thank you. I think that's a great spot to be in. We thank you all for coming, bring your terrific questions.
Let's give a round of applause. That's awesome. All right, I do want to thank you all for coming tonight. That was wonderful. And I don't know if you feel empowered as a parent advocate, but that's all it takes. It's to be engaged in social media, hashtag, send an email, show up at an event. Better yet, talk about it. That's all you need to do. And to reward you for coming tonight, we have free stuff. So without further ado, let's give you some pizza. Stop and drink. Alicia McBain, you won $10 at Sooner Legends. Hold on, sorry. Okay. Tamara O'Toole, you won $15 to the University One store. Grab some more pizza for my PTA unit and principals in the audience. Our next council event is the PTA and principals luncheon. It's December 8th at 11:30 at Norman High. Make sure you like the Norman PTA Council Facebook page if you haven't already. We share lots of good stuff. And with that, thank you again for coming. We appreciate your support.